You're listening to Investify, preaching financial independence and assisting investors to achieve a more flexible and free lifestyle through smart financial planning and real estate investing. If leaving the corporate world and jumping into this thriving industry is what you desire, tune in and listen to stories of like-minded individuals who made the leap to financial independence. Equip yourself with the right tips and tricks to start your real estate journey, making active or passive ventures that are highly profitable and rewarding.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Investify. My name is Craig Curlop, aka the Fi Guy, and I'm here with my co-host, Miss Ellie Garcade, with her new background, looking good. You remind me of like a Chicago White Sox player. Are you
Oh,
familiar with the White Sox?
I am a little bit. I like them better than the Red Sox, eh? Uh,
Oh, boo. Weren't we at the same game?
yeah, yes, yeah.
We were at the same. That's so crazy.
I know it is crazy. It should have been like I wish there was like actually I guess Snapchat has this feature, but I wish it was available for all of my friends where I could just instantly like, knowing that I'm going to Charleston, South Carolina, I could just be like, "Who's in Charleston?" instead of making a Facebook post. Anyway, if that existed, I would have been able to be like, "Oh my gosh, Craig is right around the corner. Let me go say hi."
Yeah, he's three rows down, or up actually, because we were at the very top. You couldn't get any further away than we were. But just for you guys listening, Allie, if you know, I think everyone knows, Allie's in Tucson. I'm living in Idaho. We just so happened to be at the same baseball game in Boston, Massachusetts. It was a Red Sox Yankees game. This was a couple of months ago, and the Red Sox kicked their butt like 15-5 or something.
Well, we don't have to talk about that part. But we were just at the same
It's and clearly one of us is a Sox fan here, and the other is a Yankees fan.
We'll see you at the Yankees game next. Yeah, no.
But anyway, what's been new, Allie? Give me.
Finally got this wall finished. Well, actually, it's not yet finished, but, we're gonna add another, level there. But no, things are good. I went to a real estate, agent conference, went to Tom Ferry Summit, followed by a little bit of vacation, and now I'm back and just ready to continue working. I love it.
Nice,
How are
ready,
you?
probably pumped to get after it after the conferences. Yeah, we just had Grace and I just went on a road trip, kind of up through the Pacific Northwest, from where we're at in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, down to Cannon Beach, up through like Seattle and back. And so it was like a nice week to somewhat disconnect. I wasn't fully disconnected, but yeah, it's been good, and it feels good to kind of get back to it.
Yeah, it's crazy how I don't know, in the beginning of my financial independence journey, I just wanted every day to be kind of spontaneous and like all of this, just like whatever, go with the flow, relax, not have any commitments. But humans need a routine, Like I love my calendar. I love being told what to do. So like by my own calendar. So it's interesting that that completely did a 180 for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the whole thing, even today, it's Labor Day, and I usually like to wake up and go to the gym like relatively early. I'm usually there around like 5:45, 6, but it didn't open till 7 today. And so it just threw my whole day for a whirl. I'm like, wait, I still want to go to the gym. It's Monday. Like I need to stick on my gym schedule. Then I need to get into the office or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I think especially when you are a real estate agent or you're in a job that's flexible, I kind of take holidays when I want, and I will also work holidays when I feel like it's raining. There's no reason for me not to be working today, so I'll just work, right? And so that's a glorious thing about kind of choosing your own schedule.
Yeah, and about being an agent, how everyone says, "Oh, you get to choose your own schedule." Yeah, you can either work or work more. But I love it, like you have to I don't know, it's always on as opposed to a W-2.
100%, always on, always off is what I say. Well, speaking of, someone that's always on is Miss Stacey Stenenga. I think I pronounced her name right, but
Stegenga.
Stegenga. Uh, Stacey is a great friend of a great friend of mine, great friend of my wife Grace, a great friend of yours, Allie. And so it was cool to kind of have her on the show. And I honestly didn't know how we met. I like literally forgot, and she kind of reminded us today on the show, which is kind of funny. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end to hear Stacey's why. because it is so cool and it is unlike any other why we've ever heard. And before we get totally into what Stacey has to say, if you guys wouldn't mind, please leaving us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to, Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is. It tremendously helps us out. And so that's it for what I have to say. Now let's bring on Miss Stacey Stegenga. This episode of Investify was brought to you by the FI team, a team of investor-friendly agents that service all 50 states. If you are looking to house hack, to invest, grow your portfolio, and want a true investor-friendly agent on your side, go to thefiteam.com and click Get Started, and we can't wait to have a good conversation with you. Stacey Stegenga, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today, Stacey?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, and you nailed it on my last name.
Yeah, well, I did ask you literally 3 seconds before, so
That's okay.
you know how it
It's
goes.
so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it's a fun last name to pronounce, and I don't know, but usually when people have alliterate first and last names, super successful. That's what I hear.
It's a sign of intelligence. At least that's
It
what I say about
is.
my messy handwriting.
Yeah, me too. Sorry, Al, you're not part of the cool club.
I have messy handwriting too, guys.
Okay, you're half part of it. You're in
Okay,
training.
cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Stacey, well, speaking of messy handwriting and alliterative last names, tell us how you first heard about financial independence.
Yeah, so it was actually through Scott Trench's book, Set for Life. I moved to Denver to finally settle down and be closer to my family. And I quickly realized that my income was not enough to support a lifestyle here. Nurses get paid horribly in Denver, and it was immediately an issue.
Really? So how does Denver, I would think the opposite. Like, how does Denver compare to other cities, like other comparable cities, like a Seattle or an Austin?
Yeah, so horribly. The unique thing about Denver is that with the green rush, when weed legalized, and then with the tech growth, the city just grew so exponentially so quickly, unlike the other cities that had more steady development over time. So the cost of living skyrocketed almost overnight, and the nursing income did not catch up. The other issue is that we're not unionized here in Colorado. And so all the hospitals are in cahoots and they all give us market raises, but the market is based on what the other hospitals are paying you. So if they all give us 5-cent raises, they are competitive raises because that's what everybody is doing.
So then why would any travel nurse decide to move to Denver? Or is it really not your choice?
No, they do have choice. And we joke, and so do the hospitals, unfortunately, that they pay us in mountains, sunshine, and the ski slopes. So that's why people come here,
Mhm.
because it's more of the lifestyle that they get to enjoy while they're here, but their contracts are still some of the lowest paying in the nation as well.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, all right. And so it sounds like you moved to Denver. Not, I guess, let's take it back to, so when you first read Scott's book, that was kind of the inflection point in your life. You moved back to Denver to be with family, but you were still being a travel nurse. Now I know you've got a military background too. Where did that come into play?
Yeah, so I joined a certain type of reserves when I moved to Denver so that I could work the least amount for the Air Force because I was also intending to go to grad school and had all these different plans. But when I moved to Denver, this was the first place I wasn't a travel nurse again. I moved here just purely to be close to my family. I took a full time position, which was a contributor to that pay cut. However, we're just very low paying in general. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
The military piece to it. Like, were you ever full time military?
Yes. So I was active duty for 8 years. And then I actually separated from active duty and went reserves when I went to nursing school.
Okay. And so, like, what year was this? Just so we've got a little bit of context.
So I moved to Denver in early 2018, and I found Scott's book by chance. A realtor had just randomly mentioned it to me, November of 2018. So I always joke that it was my first frugal purchase because I got it on Black Friday sale.
Nice. There you go. That is actually quite ironic. Scott would probably really appreciate that.
I'm sure he
Uh,
does.
yeah, no, that's awesome. And I bet you'd appreciate even more that your book was really kind of like the inflection point in your life. And so, so you read Scott's book, you realized financial independence was kind of the way to go. So what happens? What happens next?
Yeah, so honestly, it was more than just realizing about financial independence, but it was an entire mindset shift. That's one of the things that I appreciated about his book the most was that he talks a lot about how we're basically the American dream is all wrong. Like we overcommit and we buy things that we can't afford so that we're working to afford those things. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. So realizing that, I changed a lot of the components of the way I was living to include cutting some of my biggest expenses, and I moved into a house hack. And I really was so excited to tell your audience about this, obviously, because I read your book then. But I love to tell people about house hacking and how amazing it is, even if you don't buy the house hack. I've only lived as a renter in house hacks. I've never owned any of them. I knew early on that I wanted to invest out of state because I wanted high cash flow that I couldn't get here in Denver. And so it was still life changing to even live in a house hack and still cut my living expenses in half.
Stacey, you're totally talking to the wrong people. We
I
got
know.
great cash flow in Denver.
Well, you can, but I was able to buy 4 duplexes for the price of one house. So
Fair enough. So where did
yes.
you end up? Where did you end up making that purchase?
So I ended up going back to Tampa just for real estate investing. I had previously lived there. So it was really unique. I was able to kind of tap into some of my nursing knowledge that I gained there. I worked in a less than desirable area. And with the path of progression in the city, I was able to combine that knowledge with my real estate knowledge. And I hate saying I got lucky. I was very fortunate to have the properties that I have now.
So tell us about that. Was that a whole portfolio you bought up, or?
Nope. So I bought them individually, all at different times. My first one was October of 2020. The second was May of 21. And then the third one was just under a year later. And the fourth one was like back to back. It was January of 22 and April of 22 was my fourth.
Okay. And so are you living in these, or you're not living in these, so you're putting the 20% down and doing the whole thing?
25, yeah, because they're all multifamily. So yeah, it was a pretty penny, but like I said, the cash flow and the appreciation has really worked out for me. So it's been a blessing for sure.
Okay, let's get into these then.
I want to talk specifically about how you were house hacking. So you first read Scott's book 2018 October, I think you said, and then 2 years later is when you made your first purchase. During that time, you're saving money even though you didn't buy the house hack as a renter, you are saving so much money. I think a lot of people miss out on that where they think if they can't be the ones to buy the house hack, then it's kind of like, you know what, maybe real estate's not for me after all. And then they just give up. So when you can still be a renter and save, the point of it is to be able to save enough to then purchase. So I really, really like that. Can we first, before going into the for real deal, the first deal, can we talk about what the money situation was like? Like how much were you able to save by renting out with other people?
Yeah. So my rent cut in half. It was around 1,500 something plus utilities. My first house hack that I moved into was $950 for the master and utilities included. So still cutting those living expenses in half. But then it was also, and this is another reason why I want to recommend it to your audience, it was like the training wheels because buying a property is a huge commitment. And so being able to move into a house hack was still a great way to experience communal living and seeing if it was something that was right for me before I purchased a property. And luckily, it turned out to be amazing. But I do want to mention to everybody that I had not had a roommate up until that point in my adult life, like literally 17 on.
Wow. And so just to be 100% clear, but when you say you move into a house hack, you're moving into somebody else's house hack. So you are
Correct.
renting. Yeah. And so you've got these roommates rent by the room. Who knows? It could have been someone that we know at this. Who was it?
David Bandler.
It was David Bandler.
Yeah, you sold him the house.
I sold him the house. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That is so funny.
Yeah, that's how I met Grace.
That's how you met Grace. Oh my gosh. I did not, I honestly did not know this. Wow. Total mind blown. And so what was that like then on that side? Like as a single female, right? This is what a lot of, were you single at the time?
Yeah.
Okay. So as a single female, what was it like living with I know that house, I think it had 6 rooms, like 5 other people.
Correct. Yeah. And to go from never having a roommate to there was actually 4 others when I lived there. Yes, 4 others. So I was the 5th. Yeah, I mean a massive lifestyle difference, but honestly, the biggest apprehension I had was that I was like at least 5 years all of their senior. And so then I was like, oh, they're going to be partying, they're this, they're that. I had all these like stories made up in my mind. And I ended up being the most like inconsiderate roommate, if you will. But that was by force. I worked in a part of the hospital at the time where I had to be on call a lot. And it was for heart procedures. And we have a ton of them because of the elevation in Denver. We're the busiest. And so my pager would go off and it's obnoxiously loud. No one ever complained. I for sure was waking up the entire house. And I'm like, I'm going in. Do you guys just want to come with me? Like, but it ended up being amazing. They were all so kind and considerate. We were all from very different walks of life. And I fell in love with it. I've lived in a house hack ever since.
Wow, so Denver, like the busiest, most stressful place to be a travel nurse, and they pay you the least. But hey, you got the
Mhm.
mountains, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And a
If only I
pager.
could pay my bills with
If
the
only I could pay
mountains.
your bills. Yeah, I know you can't like chop a couple rocks off and pay it for rent. Um, no, so okay, so you're in this house, and like I think that is a huge misconception that a lot of people have is that when people think rent by the room, they think back to college, right? A group of 5 or 6 or 7, maybe even men, I feel like is what people's heads go to. That, or I should say boys, right? Because they're just, you know, crushing Bud Lights, playing ping pong, whatever, what beer pong, whatever. Like that is what college is for many people. But once you get into a job, it's like people typically are just going to go retreat to their bedrooms, and like the worst that happens is maybe they play video games a little too loud. But that was like my worst experience.
Yeah. And I didn't even have that, but yeah, it was great.
I love also that you mentioned that it really is training wheels. Before you buy the duplex and then find a roommate or, another person on the other side, rent there for 1 year. And if you really don't like it, now you know that your goal should just be to invest from afar and not a house hack that you own. It's a really good point.
All right, so let's get into this. You mentioned prior that the first property is you said it's kind of boring. You might tell us why it was boring, but then we will hop into the second one.
Well, because as Ali pointed out, that 2 years I was in analysis paralysis. So I had the numbers down pat. I always joke that I was like swiping on Zillow like somebody swipes on Tinder. I could like literally take one look at the property and based off of the purchase price, I already knew what all the expenses and everything else was because I had underwrote so many of them or analyzed so many of them that I just would know instantly if it would cash flow or not. And so I would just like literally send the listings to my agent and be like, offer on this, offer on this. So that's what happened. The only interesting thing about my first property is that I did get beat out by a cash offer. So they did go with that buyer initially. But the fortune in the follow up is that I kept asking and was like, hey, how is everything going? And the deal did fall through. And then they chose me because of that persistence. And they did know a little bit about my personal story being a nurse in that area.
That's a super, super solid point. If you can be a backup offer, be the backup offer. Even if it like holds you down or like connects you to that property for 2 weeks, like you don't make any other offers on any other properties for 2 weeks. If there's a property that you like but someone else beat you out, be like tell your realtor to be the backup offer. So in that way, as soon as that other contract falls out because of inspections or whatever it is, you are in there. Because then you also have your own inspection period. And if they fell out for a reason that you also don't feel comfortable with, you can back out. But at least you were the front runner. So I like that.
Yes. And asking your agent to follow up too, because it's not a fair expectation that they're going to remember all the time. So just having that persistence and desire within yourself, like that is what you want. And I would just text him and be like, hey, can you say hi to them again? Just make sure they remember who I am. And it worked out. So yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, I'll add too, just because you have a backup offer in doesn't mean you can't go look at some other houses. And if you see a house that you like better than one you've got a backup in, you can always rescind the backup offer. We do that quite frequently too. It's not like you're beholden to that property as a backup and you have to wait till it closes to start looking again. So I totally 100% agree. Like we've gotten a lot of deals being the backup offer because I think there's some stat out there that's like, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 30% of deals don't actually go through. And so you've
Or
got a
25.
30% chance of them. Is it 25, 30? Okay. Yeah. So you've got a 25 to 30% chance to get picked, especially in a competitive market. So huge.
And it does, I feel like it shows that you mean business as well.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And I also want to follow up on one other thing you said. You said the fortune is in the follow up. And I think this is true for whatever profession you're in. I tell our agents all the time, like, speed to lead is number one. Follow up is like a very close number two. Like, you got to get to the lead on time and you got to follow up with them consistently. And that's how you make your money, right? Very rarely are people ready to buy in that first time you contact them. So, love that. Um, all right. Well, how much more do you want to disclose on this property, or should we just get into it? I'm kind of like
Yeah.
curious.
Well,
Yeah, you say it's
that's the
boring.
boring one. Let's get to the good one. The second
Okay.
one. Yeah.
So let's get the first one you said was in October 2020. The second one was May of 2021, right?
Correct. Yep.
And so tell us where you are in May of 2021. Like that first property, it sounds boring, probably because it just worked out perfectly for you because you were in analysis paralysis. So like, what was it? What was that end cash flow number on that one? And then we'll get into number two.
It was over $200 a door and 12% cash on cash ROI, because those were the metrics that I was obsessed with from Brandon. And so I just remember that I for sure hit that. I would have to look back at my calculators to know for sure, but I've got the exact deets for the next one.
So you were at $800 basically for that first property, and now and you're able to save up another 20% down payment in just like 6 months' time.
Yeah. Well, and so that was one of the most interesting things about the second one after I closed on that first one, because you have to keep in mind too. So the purchase price on my first one was like 165 or something in that area. So 25%. And with the closing costs and everything else that goes into it, I had dropped around 50K on it. And so I closed, and my immediate feeling was awesome. I'm never going to be able to do that again. Like, I literally remember that feeling. It was almost like a sinking feeling of like, sweet, but I worked blood, sweat, and tears, made all these sacrifices. I'm never going to be able to do that again. And a few things happened. First of all, I realized that I was way overcautious on my reserves. So I was able to shave some of that down. I forget what the actual number was, but for one duplex, I had like over 30,000 sitting in my account. Stupid. Yeah. Yeah. I was just so nervous about like everything. So I shaved some of that down, but then painting a picture of where I was for deal number two, goes part into how I got the down payment, but then part into where I was. I hate calling it a deployment because that's like so Air Force of us, but I was deployed for COVID, but to South Carolina. So I was still stateside, and just there working and sweating in all the COVID things in humid South Carolina in all of that PPE. And that deployment was another way that I was able to save the money for the next down payment as well.
So you got paid for the deployment?
Yes. And my pay, sorry, I've been in the military for 18 years. So my pay, outside of how crappy the pay here in Denver is, just having that like time and service and everything, my pay is substantially more. But then you get like stipends and things for being away from home.
Okay. So you were living well below your means while in South Carolina, I take it, saving every penny you've got. You're not doing the travel nurse thing at this point, or are you?
Nope. I stopped travel nursing when I moved to Denver.
It's time for the for real
deal.
Okay, so all right, so yeah, let's get into that second one. So you're buying that second one then again in Tampa?
Correct. Yes. And so mind you, I'm still kind of in a mental block. Like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make this happen. And like any good real estate investor, I'm obsessed with Zillow. So in any free moment, I'm scrolling Zillow. And I found a listing that had been on for like more than 6 months. And it immediately piqued my interest because it had one photo. It looked like it had been taken on somebody's like flip phone from the 80s. Were they in the 80s, 90s, whenever flip phones were? It was a horrendous photo. And I just saw it and I was like, oh, there's potential here. And I sent it to my agent and I was like, find out what's going on with this. Because, and mind you, this is the beginning of Florida blowing up from all the people migrating away from other states into Florida. And so for it to be sitting on the market for 6 months was an immediate red flag. But then having only one picture, it just immediately made me think it was a difficult seller. And that ended up being correct.
Mm, okay. And would you recommend people look for properties like that to find maybe a better deal? Like where the pictures are bad or there's no pictures of the interior and it's been listed for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything is worth a shot, and that's kind of what ended up happening with this. I think at the time it was more like ignorance is bliss. Like I didn't fully understand the risk of what I was getting myself into. But I would stop and ask myself, like, or ask my agent at the time, like, what is the risk point here that I'm not understanding? And he would tell me certain things, and then I'd go back to somebody else with more experience than me and ask them the same thing. So, I mean, anything is worth a shot. You just have to know how and where to mitigate your risk. Usually, it always comes down to numbers. So with this one, it ended up being in the negotiation. There was a ton of deferred maintenance. One of the other big risk points was, and this is like such a typical landlord story that you would hear on Bigger Pockets. And I was like, oh my God, here it is. He owned the property for so long, never fixed any of it up, had never increased their rents. So they were paying each side $500 each when market rent was almost $1,000 in Tampa. Yeah. And wouldn't let us see the property without submitting an offer. So just like kind of all of those hurdles. I asked my agent like what happens, and he was like, these are the ways out. We have an inspection contingency. So I ended up submitting. And then once I found out there were no leases, we mitigated that by getting Estoppel agreements. Do you want me to go into that at all?
Yeah. Well, what is an Estoppel agreement? Never heard of that before.
So it just basically states that the tenants are going to agree. Or I'm sorry, it's a statement that they are paying what they said, what the owner said. So they both just basically stated, "I'm paying $500 a month in rent." Now they both understood that when I took it over, that can change to whatever is appropriate for market.
And so what is the purpose of an Estoppel agreement then?
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically just to validate that what the owner is saying is true. At that point, I would be obligated to either put in place my own lease or I would be forced to evict them, which is one of the things that I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I knew nothing about evictions at the time. And luckily I didn't have to evict either of them. But I would say that was one of my naive places is evictions take a lot of time and can cause you to lose a lot of money. So it's definitely something to be taken seriously.
When you were looking at the property originally, before you sent it to your realtor, was there a price difference? Like, was it actually priced appropriately, being, that you had knowledge of Tampa?
Relatively. So his initial ask price was $195. And that's kind of where the negotiations came into play, is once we realized how much deferred maintenance there was, that was my negotiating factor. So I did end up talking him down. The final purchase price ended up being $180, and it did appraise at $195. So
nice. And then, okay, in the state of Florida, so you can I don't know anything about Florida. When you buy a property that already has tenants in it, you can change the terms of the lease with them. Is that the case?
When you buy them, but there was no well, you have to honor the lease if there's a lease in place. And since there wasn't, the Estoppel agreement is basically just like affirming this is our verbal agreement. And so that's what allowed me to increase the rent as soon as I bought it. I think if a lease was actually in place, you would have to honor that through the end.
Got it. Okay. Same as Arizona.
In the Estoppel agreement, does it say anything? Does it say, like, basically let the tenants know, like, hey, I am the new landlord. I have the ability to raise rents? Like, does it give them, like, does it set the expectations for them, or do you kind of have to just do that?
No, because from my understanding, that's not the purpose of the document. It's only to attest to what is currently in place. So it's more like proof. So, like for instance, if you took over the property and they were like, "Oh, I've only been paying 200, so you can't increase me to 1,000." So it's just like validating for underwriting purposes where your baseline truly is. It's one sentence. I don't know if it was properly done. Um, I will also say that they had to be printed, both for the owner and the tenants. There was no digital signing. And so, just to give you an idea of like the kind of situation I was working through, it was a lot of challenging components.
And so at any time during this due diligence period, your Mrs. Analysis Paralysis overanalyzed, like, did you ever feel like you needed to back out, or were you just so strict with your numbers?
No, I was so strict with my numbers that I knew it still made sense. So yeah, I didn't have any doubt. And then I think also my first property being as boring as it was, I think I had not a false sense of confidence, but I was overly confident because I had no issues with my first property in those like 8 or so months. And so that would be the blessing in disguise of the challenges in real estate is that they keep us humble. This is still my prized baby, which is why I love this property so much because it cash flows, it performs the best out of all of them. Um, but you really have to be cautious in analyzing to make sure that that is true because there are multiple ways this could have gone south.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the numbers of it. So you said you bought it for 185, 25% down. Is that right?
I bought it 180, 25% down. Yes.
180. Okay. And
Mhm.
so what's that like? Maybe you put another 50 grand or so after closing costs and stuff like that.
Correct.
And so what was your mortgage payment? What were you cash flowing? Or like what was your rent, your reserves, et cetera for this one?
So I was doing 5% on maintenance, 8 or 9% for property management, 5% for capex, and then my PITI, and all of that collectively was $1,285.
Wow. And you were getting 2,000 in rent?
I increased it only to 900, which I thought that that was kind of me. Turns out I could have been a little more kind than increasing their rent $400 right out of the gate. So just make sure you consult people before doing that. It could have ended really badly for me.
So what would you have done differently?
I would have just increased it in slower increments and given them more of a chance. Like telling them, hey, I'm going to increase it $200 now. I'm going to increase it to market by this time frame. Just giving them more notice and warning so that if they choose not to do that, they can have time to find their own housing. So that way I'm not like, lighting a fire and just like hoping for the best. I just definitely did that a little bit too aggressively. And looking back, I am glad it worked out. One of my tenants has been there for 17 years. And so I'm super lucky that I ended up keeping her.
Wow. And so how did that conversation go down?
So at the time, I had property management. So I actually never had those conversations. I have since taken over management and I love talking to her. She's very worried because market rent continues to increase substantially in Tampa. And she just, tells me, like, I've always lived here. I want to continue to raise my family here. And so I am now I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but I am not raising her rent nearly as aggressively. It's still $300 under market rent to this day. But for having a tenant that's a good paying tenant, I'm like, yep, it's worth it to me.
There's something to be said for that, I think. Like, it's not all about money. I mean, that's like a big part of it, but like this is real estate is a relationship game. And having a great tenant that cares for the property and wants to grow up there and it's like basically their forever home, right? You have someone's forever home, right? Like that is so cool. And to be able to have that, like, yeah, give them all the discounts because who cares now? And now it's a few years later, like you're more now. I'm sure you had a real low interest rate compared to what you get today, and so
Oh, yeah. So 3.625.
yeah, right. You'll be keeping that for a while, I'm sure. And so, yeah, no, I think that's great. So I'm not frowning at all about that. I'm actually smiling.
Yes, yeah. It is so special too. I think people underestimate the special moments in real estate. And when I took over management, I knew in all 17 years she hasn't had any work done on her unit, or certainly not substantial. So I asked her, I was like, what can I do for you? Do you want new cupboards or appliances, counters? Like, and she was like, wait, what? Like you're not going to charge me for this? And I was like, no, ma'am, just going to make it nicer and cleaner. Like it's been 17 years. She's like just so gracious. And so it's been a really beautiful thing for me to experience that. I was so fearful of taking over management. The other important caveat to that too is all of my properties are C class in very low income areas, which I'm very well versed in. In my line of work in medicine, I used to have a lot of patients that came from these neighborhoods. But in medicine, when we try to help people, it's not always well received because it comes with challenge or difficulty. So, real estate has been such a blessing for me to be able to do special things and help people in a different way where they actually appreciate it. And so it brings me a lot of fulfillment.
So what are some of the things that you're looking for in these C class properties? And what are some things you are like that are your hard nose?
So anything, I'll do value add, meaning like light cosmetic updates, like new floors, painting, again, like cupboards, not a full kitchen rehab. I'm not going to do anything with any big systems. So HVAC failures, foundational issues, stuff like that. Plumbing for sure, hard no. Yeah, so I stay away from big things, but anything else that can be done without kicking the tenant out of the place is like my cup of tea, is kind of how I segregate the rehab.
And you went from going from having a property management to self-managing. What was the process? Why? And what's the process that you have now in place?
We hope this episode is inspiring you to take action. If you're thinking about becoming a real estate agent or an agent who wants to join an investor-friendly team, just hit me up on Instagram at the Fi Guy, because we are growing our team in Denver, Seattle, San Diego, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, but also adding to our network in all 50 states. And if you didn't already know this, the Fi team provides a super supportive environment with one-on-one coaching, accountability, and ongoing training to help develop kick-ass, rock star, investor-friendly real estate agents. So hit me up on Instagram at the Fi Guy, shoot me a DM, and we'll set up a time to chat. Can't wait to chat with you.
Yeah, so I use Hemlane and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. It's similar to Rent Ready and some of those other companies. Sorry to um, bash them, but Hemlane is just better because they have way more services. But yeah, so when I took over, the most difficult part is getting your tenants on board, switching over their payment. But since then, it's been pretty seamless. I would say my one mistake is that, so first of all, I'm doing this for real estate professional designation for tax purposes. And because it's so heavily litigated, I am doing everything to a very fine detail because I do not want to go to jail. So I started communicating with my tenants a lot and directly. And again, sometimes it's beautiful. They'll write me on the holidays and wish me a happy holiday. I love it. But I'm also like, okay, where do I go from here? Because I do value my time a lot. And now I kind of set the standard that I am always a text message away. So I do regret that. Hemlane has 24/7 maintenance services. They have maintenance coordinators that try troubleshooting, all of those things, rent collection. So yeah, it's been phenomenal. I've only had one issue with one tenant, and the rest has been very much worth it. But yeah, just shifting back to offloading some of that communication will be an interesting process.
Yeah. So what happened with the other side? It sounds like one side was pretty fine and dandy. But what happened with, yeah.
So he just ended up stopping payment quite a few months later. I want to say it was like 8 or so months later. So it wasn't necessarily because of the rent increase, but he did stop paying. And then because of the property manager, it just takes so much time. And I do mean like literally 6 months. And then because there was so much deferred maintenance, I had to essentially rehab his entire unit all at once. And I didn't really have that foresight as a new investor to be like, okay, this is where I need all of that reserves for. Because then next thing you know, your property manager is asking for large sums of cash to pay for the rehab to turn your unit all at once. And that was a very large expense all of a sudden. So,
But you had that 30K, no? Or no?
well, I shaved some of it off for that
Right, you
down
should.
payment. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it's all said and done, like when this property is pretty settled, how much total do you think you put into it? And then what was and it sounds like you're cash flowing probably $600-700 a month.
I am now. At the time of closing, I was cash flowing $257 a door, so it was just over like 500 something, and now I am closer to 700, and that's because of the rent increases. So again, I don't want to say luck, but if Tampa market had not, the demand hadn't been there as much, I don't think rent would have increased as much as it has. And so then, yeah, all in, I think I only put in like 18K towards the rehab. Maybe it was only 15, something like that. So all in at like 65-ish of cash.
And so because these are C-class properties, how are you doing the rehabs? Like what type of countertops are you using? What type of cabinets?
Everything durable. I really don't care as much about aesthetics. Typically, lower income, the aesthetics is not going to be your primary focus. You do want things to be durable. They do have 2 young children living in there now. So basically, anything that won't stain, things that can be smashed and whatever. So I forget the name of the fake marble, but it's a fake like stone like countertop with the super like waterproof, paint proof, like you can do anything to the cabinets. And then like the LVP again, that's super durable. So not as much aesthetics, but yeah, I outsourced to all the contractors, managed them from afar. You typically can have your property manager do project management for you. It comes at a very steep price. So it was not worth it to me.
How did you manage them? Yeah, from afar.
A lot of phone calls. A lot of phone calls. I asked for tons of pictures, status updates. I wouldn't pay until I saw proof. And then I honestly, video is like the golden standard because it's so much harder to hide things in video. With pictures, you can kind of like angle things and manipulate lighting and so on and so forth. Video was always telling. So found a few small things where they said they did things that they hadn't really done, but it was like a couple $100, not 1,000. So it was just a simple follow up like, hey, I'm sure you just forgot to do this, but make sure you do that task I already paid you for.
Yeah. Is there a line between like being annoying and having the contractors be frustrated with you and then like kind of like be like, oh, Stacey's calling again? And then, so like, what is that line?
I really can't say. I just personally feel it out. Sometimes I personally think that these contractors don't love fluffy. Like if you're just calling like, hey, how's it going? They're going to be like, God, stop wasting my time. So just kind of like feeling out what their personality is. And then if they do like very pointed things, being more blunt about it. Like, when is this going to be done? You told me you would finish that project to come back, because they do a lot of juggling. My father is in a line of business that's very similar. There are similarities to contracting in the sense that they take a ton of phone calls, they're not writing things down, forget about a calendar. I honestly admire them for being able to keep it together because without my calendar, I would be lost. Like, no chance I could remember all of that. So just putting yourself in their shoes and like trying to communicate in that way instead of being like derogatory or condescending and just being like, hey, friendly reminder, this, and that. And then just also choosing to continue working with the ones and making sure you're complimenting the ones that do well. So if I would always ask them, how do you like your reviews? Do you want them on Yelp, Google, wherever? So just make sure that you're encouraging their good business by recognizing them for that hard work.
I really love that. I love for at least with my contractors, I always try to be pretty personable with them. Like I find that I end up being friends with a lot of them, especially if they're doing bigger jobs. And I think because of that, like there's just a sense of loyalty. And then,
Mhm.
when you're kind of a, an agent or something like that, or like if they do good, I'm going to refer them a lot of business. I've got
Mhm.
two contractors that I've allowed them to basically like quit their jobs because of our clientele and just handle them on their own. And I think like it's amazing, but like they give me discounts, like all that kind of stuff. And they're just like, they do really good work. And so I'm sure Stacey, like same with you, like they know you're going to be buying properties in the future.
Yes. But the interesting thing was what I found to be really beneficial was asking them if they wanted the referrals because of the way the climate was changing in Tampa with all the people moving there. A lot of them were so overwhelmed because they couldn't keep up with the amount of clients they were getting. And so I would ask them pointed questions like, do you want higher dollar jobs so that you can stop working as many? Can I send this certain type of client to you? So just kind of asking them what type of referral. Also, everybody thinks contractors love doing everything across the board, and it's not necessarily true. One contractor might love doing tile, the other might hate it. So asking like what do they enjoy doing and then bringing them referrals of that type of work is also sometimes beneficial.
So huge. And the contractors too, like some real estate investors, especially newer ones, they kind of treat them like trash. They think like, oh, like they'll do anything for my business. And really that's just not true. Like you need to basically like they're interviewing you at the same time you're interviewing them. Like they want to make sure that they want to do work for you. And so like those questions that you ask, like, hey, would you like referrals? Hey, what's your best method of communication? Hey, like just being overly communicative with them is huge.
Mhm. 100%.
All right, Stacey. So that was May of 2021. Right now
Mhm.
we're like a little over 2 years, almost. Crap, man. 2023 is flying by. We're
Yeah.
like almost 2.5 years later. Uh, where is your portfolio at today? How much passive income? How much equity do you have? And then, yeah, let's leave it at that.
So I have 4 duplexes total. I should know my total equity, but I don't. It is probably upwards of like 600. I did end up doing a cash out refi because my first 2 had appreciated so much. Um, so I want to say it's around 600, but I cannot confirm.
Okay.
My FI number is 5 grand. I will hit it by the end of this year, non-negotiable.
Woo!
Baller. Yes.
Um,
Sweehaha.
that's also me
So am I.
manifesting. That's me manifesting. Don't let the audience don't be fooled. I am close. I am close. But I did want to share this with you guys because I had something massive happen to me this year. No one talks about how financial independence is such a moving target. Um, I don't know why. I mean, it makes sense. Like your expenses on your property are going to change. It's life. Like nothing stays the same. However, I've been working so hard to hit FI. It was like truly my primary goal. And this year, because of the insurance crisis in Florida, I don't know if you guys have heard anything about it. My policies on all 4 duplexes 5x, not double, 5x. Luckily, I was able to do a whole bunch of research, find a different company that was with no claims. I found a new company and it is now double, but before they underwrote it, because that was like a few weeks, let me tell you the amount of tears I shed because it was all of my cash flow, except for one other investment product I have outside of real estate. And it was devastating because I was like so close. I literally have less than $800. And then it's just like ripped away from me because of insurance, something so uncontrollable. Um, so I just like really wanted to like share that with people because I don't know again why I ever thought that it would be like, oh, I secured this property. This is always where it's going to go. It'll never go down. It will only go up, but it can. So just know that and maybe don't quit your job as soon as you want. Like, I don't know. There's just so many components where I was like rethinking a lot of things, having that shock and awe.
Yeah, that is, It's true, right? In most cases, right? I think like it will trend upward, but in those cases, like the insurance thing is kind of like a black swan event in the state of Florida. What? So, have you got any sort of like ick from Florida at all? Like, would you want to diversify into some other states, or
I am diversifying now as I pursue commercial acquisitions. I am moving into Midwestern states. That's also just to diversify risk with natural disasters. But no, I still love my Tampa properties. I plan to keep 3 of them. I would say forever, but never say ever. But I plan to keep them for a very long time. I do want to sell my nightmare property, but outside of that, I do plan to keep them. So no, I'm not blaming them. But the issue is, and I don't, unless you want me to go down the rabbit hole of what caused it, it will take years to fix. So it is definitely a long-term game.
for sure? And that's all real estate is, right? Like it's all long term. You're going to take hits, but overall, I mean, you just said that your first two properties appreciated so much that you had to cash out refi, right? And so the amount that you're paying extra in insurance each month compared to the equity that you've gained is probably 10 plus years, I have to imagine. And so you're still very much in the green, but you're obviously going to take some blows along the way. Um, the financial independence thing also I think is interesting because like I've kind of been at all the cycles. Like I hit my first number was 3,000 when I was single by myself living, right? And I hit that. And then it kind of became 5, right? And then it became 10, and then it became 20, and then you're like it kind of always keeps getting a little bit more. Have you felt that at all, or because it just feels like you can be more conservative with like more passive income? Yeah,
Yeah. I did, and I had no pressure on it. But I've kind of like, as I've grown in the real estate community, I've started to grow my purpose, and gain a lot of clarity around what I'm trying to do for the medical profession. And so that's really where that FI pressure was coming from. Because in order for me to fully be able to do the things that I want for healthcare and make the changes that need to occur in America, I truly have to be financially independent, because of the risk of retribution from hospitals. And so that's, again, kind of where that devastating point was coming from, because in order for me to make that difference and speak out and be part of change, I have to be financially independent. And to have that taken away from me just felt really devastating. But luckily, we're back on track ish.
Were any of your properties hit by the recent hurricane there?
No, thank goodness.
Nice. Okay, that's
Yes.
good.
I was joking that I would have loved for the nightmare property to be a hit. Don't tell insurance that.
hopefully the insurance agent's not listening. Says every podcast host who,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure they're not.
I mean, if they are, I have some other things for them to hear.
Yeah, why don't we just get started? Yeah. No. So, Stacey, you mentioned kind of briefly that you're kind of transitioning from the small multifamily into some larger multifamily stuff in the Midwest. You mentioned you're going to the Midwest because of natural disasters, but why commercial? And are you staying with that BC class that you like so much?
Yeah, absolutely. With the C class value add. Yeah. And it's just, it's, one roof. I think Brandon Turner is the one that says it all the time. Like, it takes as much energy and effort to do one deal that's like 2 doors versus one deal that's like 15 or 30. And I'm just really finding that to be true. So it's just economy of scale, and it's time.
So, are you going to syndicate, or are you this is gonna be all your cash?
Oh gosh, don't I wish if I was that loaded, I would for sure be financially independent. No, it's we're going to do a JV structure. So kind of keeping it smaller, having some capital partners, but then still having all of the equity in larger chunks to each of the investors and contributors.
I see. So ideally, how many? Well, I guess can you tell us a little bit about like what is a JV and how does that differ from a syndication?
Yeah, so for a syndication, it's really just scale. You typically have way more people on your GP team, which are the people that are like finding the deal, running the deal, analyzing the deal. You typically have like 4 to 5 people. And then you're bringing on, because you're buying like 200 doors, you're bringing on like hundreds, like 130, I think is an average, maybe 100 It depends on the deal, but you're bringing in a lot of investors that all buy a share. So I want to do a 5 to 30 unit where it's a 1 to 2 million purchase price, and then bringing in just enough capital investors to cover that down payment and your risk capital, and then keeping all of the equity between us. So ideally, less than 6 would be my goal, but we'll see.
Amazing. And so how do you even like a lot of people listening, are probably still looking for their house hack, maybe first, second, or third, but just thinking about the next steps, right? Like they're probably a couple years behind you. How do you even get started in commercial? Like what's the first thing you do?
A lot of education. Commercial is similar, but it's also very different. I think the most interesting thing to me about it is, and I was like, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble, but there's a lot of gatekeepers in commercial. So it's definitely like a cool kids club. It's not like anybody can just come in. The brokers are what they're called, but it's similar to an agent. They're highly incentivized to close deals, and so if they don't have faith that you are adequately analyzing your properties or that you can't close the deal, they just won't work with you, and that's their right. So you have to start by earning their trust to even give you deals and work with you. And then after that, because of the current climate of all of our issues with lending in commercial, you have to gain the trust of a commercial lender. Um, so the similarity is it's always relationships in real estate. So just like really getting to know people, getting them to know, like, and trust you essentially, and then taking off from there. But we'll see. Check back in a few months.
Yeah, no, I really love that, and I think another thing with everything you just said, I totally agree with. But you definitely with larger stuff, you can't do it all, right? Like with your properties, you kind of found the deals, you analyzed them, you managed them, you underwrote them, all this stuff, right? Like with a larger multifamily, it's like you just said it. I can't remember if it was when we were recording or not, but you had to hire an underwriter because you can't do that. And
Mhm.
so if you're what is the value that you bring to a larger deal like this?
My relationships and acquisitions is where I'm really finding my. That was just to clarify too. Another reason I wanted to go JV is because I identify with a lot of different roles that are part of the team in commercial. And I really wanted the opportunity to play with each of them before committing. A lot of syndicators, like once they're in a certain role, I don't want to say they're stuck there, but they're committed because you're putting in a ton of work to be successful in that role. And so I kind of wanted to dabble in each of them. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I loved analyzing residential properties, loved it. The numbers, I'm like, oh, there's nothing better than finding a property that works. Uh, in commercial, that spreadsheet has brought me to tears more times than I want to admit. So I'm like, oh no, this is not my expertise. Like, I'm a people person. So I'm leaning more towards the acquisitions, finding deals, negotiating deals, things like that.
Amazing. And so what's funny is that I feel like there was a really big push into the multifamily space maybe a year or two ago, and I kind of am feeling a lot more people leaving now. And so are you kind of playing that game of like being fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful? Like is that intentional? Or you just like always been a dream, it just so happened timing works out?
No, yeah, I'm being very intentional about it. I've been obsessed in stalking the commercial market. And we're at the brink of basically like what happened in 2008 to residential is now happening in commercial. So there's going to be a lot of distressed sellers and a lot of opportunities are coming.
Mhm. I think so, because a lot of people are stuck in those 3% rates that they were projecting we're gonna exit at, and now cap
Mhm.
rates are increasing and yeah. So
Cred IQ is a really fun website. If you've never checked it out, it's a whole bunch of graphs and numbers and nerdy things. It shows you exactly how many commercial loans are coming due in what years and what quarters. So yeah, there's a lot coming.
Oh, cool. I've never been on this website.
Yeah, it's a little fun way to nerd out.
all right, Stacey. So, you had mentioned that you're just a few $100s, would see or away from your financial independence number. And so What are you going to do in the next 4 months to get there before the end of the year?
Close on a bunch of commercial properties.
Yeah. Oh, the commercial properties are going to get you over the edge.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
You're going to look for something that cash flows right away?
So that's always the goal. I will say that's the most interesting thing going into the commercial world is that there's a lot of value in the potential of a property, not to be discredited by a property non-performing. So I don't know if I can bring myself to buy a non-performing property, but with interest rates the way that they are, as long as there's a significant amount of potential for decreasing expenses and increasing the revenue, um, as long as it's there within a year, I would consider it. But my hope is still that I will do it by the end of the year.
Okay, perfect. And make sure you don't buy a bad deal just to get there by the end of the year, because then it will take you even longer. It's the end of the year
Oh,
is
trust
still
me.
arbitrary. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure you're good with that. Yeah,
yeah.
Awesome.
Paid my dues.
Yeah. All right, Stacey. Well, it is getting to be that time where we need to hit into the final part of our show. Before we get there, do you have any parting words of wisdom for the listeners?
Yeah, I would just say there's beauty in one of my mentors used to always say to me, it's choice, not chance. A lot of people that listen to like more skilled investors are like, oh, that's luck. You got there because you bought in a appreciating market and, just all these little things. And I just think there's so much value in the small decisions that we make every single day that lead up to those big moments so that it looks like luck on the outside, but it's not. So just being extremely mindful of the decisions that you're making and what you say no to is yes to something else and just make sure that's what you want it to be yes to.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Allie, it's time.
For the
Final four.
The final four.
Ba-dum-bum. Why don't you kick us off?
I know that you are a reader, Stacey, and you read hella fast. What book are you reading right now?
I try to get better about reading physical books, but I'm currently reading 10x is easier than 2x. It's a really good one.
By who? I never heard of that.
It is Dr. Hardy and Dan Sullivan.
It's the same authors who
nice. Yeah.
wrote Who Not How, I believe.
And Gap
right?
in the
Yeah.
Gain.
And Gap
Mhm.
in the Game. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if it's anything like those two books, I'm sure it's very good. But I've heard a lot of
Yes.
good things about it.
Yes.
Nice.
All right, Allie, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well,
Sorry, not
since you're
Allie.
asking me,
Yeah. Yeah, Stacey, you're done. I want Allie's advice, and then we'll go to Stacey.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, totally with Stacey, but Allie, just share it with us. Let's go with that.
The best piece of it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna hog it.
No.
Stacey, this is your show.
Stacey, all right, fair enough.
I would say that the most painful lessons that I've experienced so far in real estate have been because I was taking advice only from people that benefited from my purchase in real estate and/or yes, my purchase. So while I think agents are phenomenal human beings, it is unfair to expect for them to tell you and teach you every single thing. So just owning that responsibility for yourself and doing your own due diligence, and then also asking people, mentors, whoever in your network for advice to double check you. And again, most specifically, someone that doesn't have an interest in the sale.
I really like that.
I really like that too. And I think you can tell, you should be able to have the discernment between, hey, this person is just trying to get me to the finish line to get paid, or is this person actually have my best interest in mind? Because usually I feel like it's not like a, yes, you should buy it, or no, you shouldn't buy it. It's like a, yeah, you should buy it if the seller fixes these things, right? And so like that should be the answer almost all the time, because anything can be fixed.
Well, and I just feel like there became an obsession with this title of investor friendly agent, where I love it and it's super important to designate. However, there's also going to be agents that see other people being successful with that and they're going to claim to be the same thing when they might not necessarily be. I don't know what BiggerPockets threshold is for them to sign up as an investor friendly agent on the website. Right. I'm like, but just knowing that that's attractive to people, and that's fine because that's business. But just doing your own due diligence, be protective of yourself.
Yeah, it used to be when someone, I feel like a couple of years ago, being an investor from the agent actually meant you had investment properties. You've helped a handful of people do investment properties. And it's not, I don't think it's the same anymore. You have to really do your diligence on the people totally.
And that goes further past agents as well, like your CPA, a tax professional, literally everybody. I remember talking to someone that I think I started the communication through Bigger Pockets actually. I was looking for a new CPA. This is like back in the 5 years ago. And they're like, "Yeah, I am an investor as well." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like that's awesome. Tell me about your portfolio." I own my house. Okay. The and what else? And they're like, "No, but I know all the rules, I know everything." And maybe they did, but it was not going to be somebody that I was going to work with. So, even beyond the agent stuff, always, do your due diligence.
Totally. Yeah. And like even on our team, we don't allow anyone to work with an investor client if they don't have at least an investment property themselves. And I think that's huge. And so yeah, just make sure that whoever you're working with has actually walked the walk and not just talking the talk. Anyway, we've belabored that point.
All right, question number 3. I know that you are such a passionate person, so I'm super excited to hear your answer. What is your why? Like, why are you doing all of this?
Yeah. So the blessing in disguise is that my family lived in Denver. So I was committed to staying here at all costs, regardless of what my nursing pay was. But a few things have unfolded since then. And we're at an extremely pivotal moment in healthcare that has been years of mistreatment, abuse. It's a massive money maker. And all of the money is going to CEOs, their for profit hospitals, lobbyists, pharmaceuticals, things of that nature. And nurses and people that care. Like one of the slogans, for instance, is we're trying to change healthcare to human care, or patients over profit. They've made healthcare too much of a business. And the weight and the pressure of that profit is often coming down on nurses. And that's only because, by numbers, we are the largest of the employed staff in a hospital. But so what they're doing is forcing us to take 8 patients instead of 4. Or like during COVID, you were supposed to have 1 based on the sickness of the patient, and you would have 4. So there's been all this research that shows that the more time a nurse spends with a patient, the better their outcomes, the better their recovery, all of these things. There's so much data and science. But because of the profit and because these are big businesses and lobbyists and politicians, this is all the way up at Cap Hill, um, the profit is still being made in a very large way. And nurses are getting fed up because it's been more and more apparent. COVID was just the final straw. And so now we're starting to speak up. And it is the most beautiful thing I've seen, but it's also extremely scary. And that's why I have really just started speaking out and pushing hard to finish replacing my income so I can be part of that change without fear of losing my job and my livelihood.
That's an amazing why. I have like so much to say because I like absolutely despise like the way our current health system works in pharmaceuticals and big foods. And I don't know, I just think I think it's all like if you just follow the money, right? It's like very clear like who owns the big foods, and they're poisoning us, making us more sick, and then the same people they're making us sick so that they can fix us, right? And it's like why don't we just eat healthy? But anyway, that's a whole other path. Yeah. So Stacey, I just love that. The last question I've got for you is, what age would you choose to go back to and spend 1 week at? Any age you want.
I don't remember how old I was. I'm like, what? Like 10 years ago? I was like, you don't really want me to admit on air how old I am. So 10, we're going to go back to 2011, 12, 11, so that I could go back to Korea. I am absolutely obsessed with Southern Korean food. I also had the time of my life there, but the food, I have not been able to find some of their traditional dishes in America the way that they were made over there. And I joke all the time that I'm going to literally fly back to Korea just so I can eat it. So
I'm
that would be
in.
fun, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Let's
like,
go.
Korea is a good time. It's a beautiful country. But yeah, that's what I would do.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right, Stacey, where can people find out more about you?
On my Instagram, it's invest4freedom_RN.
Invest4freedom_RN. Love it. Go give Stacey a follow if you want to see her journey. Keep her accountable for hitting her goal by the end of the year and hitting that and following along to see what she's going to do with the commercial space. I'm really excited to see what's up there.
And changing healthcare.
Yes.
And changing
Yeah.
healthcare. Even
Just a
bigger
small
thing.
revolution. No big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome. Stacey, well, it was a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for taking your Labor Day to come and chat with us. And yeah, we'll see you not at BPCon, which is super sad, but sometime soon, I hope.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It was so nice.
And that was Stacey Stegenga. Allie, what do you think about Stacey?
Stacey Stegenga. She's she's so sweet and she's so passionate. And I loved her why. It was very different from the whys that we normally get. And she's like looking to change healthcare in America, which I love. But it starts with helping out herself first. You know, she needs to be in a position where she's able to have FU money for, you know, to say FU to big pharma and her job. So similar to, I'm sure, you know, it's similar to anybody right now looking to leave their W-2. Well, like when I was in the military, I needed also the FU money to be able to just bounce. So I love also that she's going from residential multifamily to now commercial. I know that's something that she's wanted to do. And for her to now just be all in, she's said no to some other opportunities. And now because she's so focused on commercial. So I'm excited to have her back in the future to talk about commercial stuff.
Yeah, I think it's cool. You know, like you just kind of know when you're ready for that transition, right? And some people it happens sooner, and some people it happens later. And so I think for her, it's probably relatively on the quick scale. But I think she's been doing this thing for a few years. Like she's kind of over the single family stuff. She's got to like scratch that itch of multifamily. And the great thing is she can still invest in single family if she decides that multifamily is not great for her. And so I think it's great that she's going to jump in for that. She's going to need a lot of money to help combat the healthcare problems in the U.S. for sure. And so I'm going to be rooting for her big time because I think she's very right in that the hospitals want us sick, right? That's how they make their money. So
Yeah. Dude, Stacey for president. I'm in.
seriously, I'm down. Let's do it. Is it too late? Is she 35?
We'll nominate her. I don't know. She wouldn't say her age. Let's just nominate her.
Yeah, we'll just nominate her. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Cool. All right. Yeah. So if you guys like this episode, again, if you wouldn't mind, please leaving us a rating and review. Helps us out big time. Allie, any last words you want to say before we head out of here for the week?
Give us a review. That's it. I hope you guys are also taking action, like listening to this and inspiring you. Reach out to these guests that we have on. Maybe not ask them to analyze your entire deal unless you want to pay them for their time, but they are a resource. You know, they find these episodes and take action on them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you've listened to 20, 30, 40 of the episodes here and you still haven't done a deal, I think it's safe to say that you are in analysis paralysis, right? There's a couple of different symptoms of that. It took Stacey a couple of years to get over that. I mean, I potentially was even in it for 6 months or so. Like from when I started learning to when I made my first deal was about 6 months. And you just kind of like need someone to tell you like, hey, you're in analysis paralysis. Just like take action and like, who cares what happens? You'll learn from it because it's the repetitive buying and buying and buying and buying that's going to make you wealthy. You're probably not going to hit a home run on your first deal. It just doesn't really happen. And so just take action.
Yes. Take action.
Take action. Leave us a review. But if you guys enjoyed listening, yeah, thanks so much for coming on this week. If you haven't already, I'm the Fi Guy on Instagram. Shoot me a follow. Allie is
Allie the Agent, spelled A-L-I. See you there.
Allie the Agent. We'll see you on Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see y'all next week.
That's it for this episode of Investify. We hope that these nuggets of real estate wisdom lead to more savvy financial planning and a clearer path towards financial freedom. For more content like this, Subscribe to the show at investify.com. Don't forget to leave a rating and share it with your friends. Together, we can transform more real estate newbies into successful and clever investors. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next one.